Joanne Lees and her boyfriend Peter Falconio are driving along a remote stretch of highway north of Alice Springs. What happens next turns a carefree holiday into one of the biggest crime stories to captivate Australia and the United Kingdom for decades.
I shout out to the man, "Why are you doing this?"
Bradley Murdoch, a self-confessed drug runner, has been convicted of murdering the British backpacker Peter Falconio.
A Darwin judge today jailed Murdoch until 2031.
Bradley Murdoch is really the key to this whole case.
It's Saturday evening, 14th July 2001. Joanne Lees and her boyfriend Peter Falconio are driving along a remote stretch of highway north of Alice Springs. The young English tourists are on the trip of a lifetime, travelling through Southeast Asia before exploring Australia. In the late afternoon and against advice, they leave Alice Springs for Darwin. According to Joanne, the story goes like this. Night has fallen and the couple are motoring along in their Kombi when a male driver in a Toyota Land Cruiser flashes them down. He tells them their Kombi is letting out sparks. Peter gets out to look, and when he does, the man shoots him dead. Then turns the gun on Joanne. He punches her in the head and restrains her with cable ties before bundling her into the back of his truck.
I shout out to the man, "Why are you doing this? Is it money that you want? What do you want?" And I ask him if he's going to rape me.
But she escapes and runs off into the night.
I thought I ran in to the bush over there, but now that I'm here, I know that he's here. I must have gone over there.
She tells police she hides in the bushes for 5 hours while the man and his dog hunt for her. But eventually they drive off. She flags down a passing truck and the drivers call the cops. Bradley Murdoch, a drug smuggler who has been in and out of prison, is charged with the murder. He denies guilt, but in 2005 he's convicted and sentenced to life. He's since lodged 2 appeals against his conviction. Both have failed. Now 20 years on, the whereabouts of Peter Falconio's body remains a mystery, and police are renewing calls for information.
I was in my late teens, early 20s when the story broke about Joanne Lees and Peter Falconio in the Outback, and it's been one that's captivated Australia, and the mystery of it is really what sort of drew me into it. So I was, as I say, working in the UK, and I decided when we were allowed to, outside of the lockdown restrictions, to go and visit Joanne and try to speak with her and speak with her family about what they thought now. At the time, it was coming up to the 19th anniversary of Peter's murder and disappearance. And there's always just been a desire, a real yearning for the truth in this case, which only one man can really solve. That's Bradley John Murdoch. And he's sitting up in Darwin, in the Darwin Correctional Facility, and he's not talking.
You said you went to visit Joanne and her family. Did you have any luck speaking with them?
I spoke to her dad outside his home, which is a very modest home in Huddersfield, and he's still living there with Joanne's brother, and it just the family hasn't been able to move on. But one thing that was interesting, her father said that he was surprised. He'd watched a documentary and he was sort of thinking perhaps that Bradley John Murdoch wasn't guilty based on some information that was out there. So I'm not sure whether that was whether he was accurate in that statement, but it just makes me wonder how fractured that family has become, because just because when there's situations you are a victim of crime, the fractures can go on for a very long time. And Joanne, she still has a house in Huddersfield, but she hasn't married, and it doesn't seem like her life has moved on or turned out the way she expected when she went on that holiday in 2001.
I think one of the interesting things with this case was watching how the Australian public, really, is really persecuted Joanne because she didn't appear initially to show a lot of emotion. It was kind of similar in a way to the Lindy Chamberlain case, I thought, in that, you know, because she was quite kind of a little bit withdrawn in her initial appearances with the press, people instantly and incorrectly assumed she had been involved in the murder, and it was kind of trial by public opinion. Do you remember seeing that unfold yourself?
Joanne wore a T-shirt and she was criticised for wearing a singlet which had the words "cheeky monkey" written on it. Now, I'm not sure about you, Amelia, but I don't know if I'm thinking about my wardrobe after I've been kidnapped, held hostage for 5 hours, tied up with cable ties and had to run and chase down a car to try and get my freedom. I've been to many of those press conferences where there's 20, 30 photographers, 40 people, lots of bright lights and those type of things, it's very disconcerting for anybody. Let alone someone who's been a victim of crime.
Anyone that's spoken to me or has been in contact with me, no one doubts me. It's only media that have questioned my story.
Why have you been reluctant to make the press up to the stage?
Because I find it also overwhelming and intimidating.
What do you think it is about this case? I mean, you know, someone has been convicted of this crime and indeed when they've tried to appeal, you know, had that conviction upheld. Yet people are still so fascinated about what they say really happened. What's the element of mystery about this?
It is unusual, Amelia, for someone to be convicted, not unheard of and not unprecedented, but unusual for someone to be convicted when there's no body that has been found. By Murdoch not giving out the location of the body, then he still has that power over the case and over people perhaps in the jail and that sort of society that he's among where he can protest his innocence. But for the family of Joanne and for the family of Peter, who I did speak with Peter's father, Luciano, in Huddersfield when we were there, they're still devastated. They live in this beautiful, picturesque town in Huddersfield that had lovely pubs down the road. It's kind of like what you'd see in a British TV show, what you would think a picturesque town. And their lives are still shattered. Their lives are completely shattered, and all they want to find out is where their son's remains are.
What kind of motive would he have had for murdering Peter Falconio?
Other than power, or perhaps just because he could. It doesn't appear there's a direct link. They're not known to each other as far as we're aware. It does seem to be random, but who knows what's in his mind? Only he can say what's in his mind, and he's denying that he did it in the first place, which is not what the jury and not what the courts found. And he's sentenced until 2034, so he's going to be 72 when he gets out. So I think there's going to be a lot of time for him to think on his actions, but there doesn't seem to be a direct, obvious crime of passion or reason why he would do it, other than perhaps for the power and because he could. Bradley Murdoch is really the key to this whole case. Now, obviously, he's been found guilty, and he's been convicted of these charges. I mean, it was a unanimous verdict. It was beyond reasonable doubt for all those people on the jury. Now, I think Bradley Murdoch still has power and still has sort of notoriety and likes the fact that people talk about him, and he probably really likes this, and perhaps he's watching this from the Darwin jail in Howard Springs. I wouldn't be surprised. There's often killers can be narcissists. But I want to know what he actually thinks and what actually happened and why. Why can't he give the family that comfort or peace or I don't know. I don't even know how I would feel if I was in that situation. But when I did speak to Luciano, Peter's father, in Huddersfield last year, he did want to know where his son's remains were. I think for them, according to the chats we had, that they were quite distraught that they still hadn't been able to sort of lay this to rest. And I mean, even if the remains are found, it would be some comfort, but it's going to be a very, very difficult road for those families involved, and has been and will continue to be for a long time to come.